Namaskar and a very warm welcome to everyone joined in today on our special webinar that commemorates the 68th Wildlife Week. The theme for this Wildlife Week is Restoring Key Species for Ecosystem Restoration. And joined in today to speak to us more on the theme is Dr. Bilal Habib, who is a scientist at the Wildlife Institute of India, Dehradun. Dr. Bilal has done his doctorate on the ecology of the Indian wolf in the Great Indian Bustard Sanctuary in Maharashtra, and his interests lie in the integration of quantitative and interdisciplinary approaches to conservation challenges, especially developmental activities. With close to 2 decades of experience and numerous academic papers and accolades for his contribution to the field, I now invite Dr. Bilal to present on today's theme.
Thank you, Arundhati. I'll be sharing my presentation. I hope it's visible.
Yes.
Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. And on occasion of this World Wildlife Day, I'll be talking about recovering key species for ecosystem restoration. As you all will be knowing that this is the theme for the World Wildlife Day celebrations for the year 2022. And you all will be aware that we are celebrating March 3rd as a World Wildlife Day. And probably this day is devoted to celebrate and raise awareness of the various wild animals, flora and fauna inhabiting the national habitat. And IUCN is celebrating this particular day from the year 2013. And there are specific themes from the last 8 or 9 years for celebrating this particular day. Like in 2019, the day was celebrated as Life Below Water, which is for people and planet, trying to bring the attention of the people about the presence, about the requirements, and about the importance of water. In 2020, we celebrated the day as Sustaining All Life on Earth. And today, as on 3rd October 2022, we are celebrating this day as Safeguarding Key Species for Ecosystem Restorations. Now, the first question which comes to our mind, why this particular theme, safeguarding key species for ecosystem restorations? So if you try to go back and try to evaluate what was the reason for IUCN or CITES to select this particular theme for today's World Wildlife Day, we know that animal extinction rates are ranging from 0.01 to 0.1% per year. If you just look at the percentages, it looks very small. But if you just look at the number of animals which are going to be extinct at this particular rate, it's something 200 to 2,000 animals face the threat of extinction annually. So on an average, something between 200 to 2,000 species are facing the threat of extinction every year. That's why this year's theme was to safeguard key species to restore ecosystem. That means the main objective of the theme is to look for those species which are at the brink of extinction. And if we are able to safeguard those particular species, what type of ecosystem services we are able to restore, so that we link the recovery of the species or the restoration of the species towards the restoration of the ecosystems. And if you look at this particular slide, that means something around 8,400 species of wild fauna and flora as critically endangered. 30,000 species are either endangered or vulnerable. And World Wildlife Day 2020 aims to drive public and political debate towards the urgent need to reverse the fate of most of the endangered species and support the restoration of their habitats and ecosystems. That's why this particular theme is there. And if you go, we know that we are actually facing mass extinction of all the species. You start whether talk about the mammals, birds, you talk about reptiles, amphibians, arthropods, insects, fishes, corals, and other animals, and a lot of plant species. Human civilization has had a negative impact on most of the living things on Earth. And these impacts are, if you try to categorize, if you try to visualize these particular impacts, so probably we are currently living through a mass extinction event. probably which will be the largest known. The speed with which mass extinction has onset appears to be the result of human activity. And scientists estimate that around 10,000 times more species per year than the normal rate. If you look globally, then insect populations has declined by 40%, and one third are endangered. And this is very alarming because we all know that insects play a very critical role in pollination. And if we are not able to maintain insects, we will not be able to maintain food chain on which we humans depend on. And if you look at the animal populations across the globe has declined by 70 years in the last 50 years. And most of the more important reasons for decline is human consumption, urbanization, population growth, and trade. If you look at the primates, which are very closer relatives to humans, they are under extraordinary threat. 2/3 of the primate species are vulnerable, endangered, or critically endangered. 80% of our primate species are in severe population decline, and humans are mostly responsible for that because of the deforestation and hunting. And 40% of all species of the primates are threatened by the climate change. So worldwide, more than 650,000 marine mammals are caught or seriously injured by fishing gear annually. So these are some of the threats which I'm trying to put in front of you so that to get you people oriented why there was a need of this particular theme for World Wildlife Day. So something around 30,000 species, 3,000 species of the whales, dolphins, porpoises are threatened by the gill nets, fishing nets every year. 74% of the grassland bird species are in decline. So at present, if you see that we stand to lose big cat species. In the next 10 to 15 years, the lion population is going to be down to 25,000 in Africa, which probably was around 450,000 formerly in this particular region. Leopards, which number 50,000, now they were around 750,000 cats before. So most of these animals, they are poached for their body parts, their teeth, their bones, their claws, particularly for use in China and other Southeast Asian countries. Lizard populations are especially vulnerable to climate change. A recent study projects that if the current decline in lizard population continues, 39% of all the lizard populations will be extinct, and 20% of the global species will be extinct by 2080. So these are the major crises which most of the species are facing. And if you see who are responsible for these particular reasons, I think 90% of the times it's because of the humans. So if you look at these particular threats, so you call it aptly, it's an age of humans in which most of the species are living. In other sense, we call it wildlife and human dominated landscapes. And most of the species are threatened because of so many reasons. And that's why it's very apt to name this as a species, as an era where we need to recover species, and we need to recover species, and we need to restore habitats. Let's turn to our country because these were the global perspectives. So if you try to look towards our country, so we probably think that we have a 21% of forest cover in our country, and we have a protected area network of around 5%. And if you look at the average protected area size, it's something around 200 square kilometers. And this size is not enough to sustain our large carnivores. And we are very biodiversity rich country. We have more than 40% of the tiger population is outside protected areas. We have 70% of population of tigers, of the global population of the tigers in India. And we have 75% of the tigers of Asiatic elephant in our India. And most of these animals is outside protected area. And we have a lot of animals which live outside protected areas, which makes our wildlife to interact with the humans on daily basis. So when our wildlife interact with the humans on daily basis, the probability of the conflict, the probability of the interactions increase. Sometimes these interactions are positive and sometimes these interactions are negative. These interactions are both harmful to us and these interactions are both harmful to humans. So what we are looking at. So if you look at different protected areas, our protected areas are too small to manage the population of the large carnivores in our country. So if you look at tigers, if you want to see tigers surviving for next 100 years, you need core area of 1,000 square kilometers, an area where there are no humans. And if you look at the average core area size of our tiger areas, it's around 800 square kilometers, which means that none of the tiger reserve is going to sustain our tigers for 100 years. There are only 5 to 6 tiger reserves with a core area of more than 1,000 square kilometers. So only these 5 to 6 tiger reserves shall be able to sustain our tigers for next 100 years. So what about other 45 tiger reserves? So it's only possible to maintain the population of tigers in tiger reserves if these tigers are able to move from one protected area to other protected area. That's only possible if the landscape outside tiger reserves, which is a human dominated landscape, which is around 15% of our forest cover, is conducive for the movement of animals. Now, if this particular landscape is conducive for the movement of animals, which indicates that there will be more interaction between animals and humans. And if there will be more interaction between humans and animals, there's a possibility that some of these interactions may be positive and some of these interactions may be negative. So when animals decide, so if we think let's manage this landscape for the movement of animals so that we are able to maintain our protected areas, the animals living in our protected areas as in a metapopulation framework. So let's look at our country. So this is a population density map. So if you put this map on the forest cover map of our country, you will see that most productive landscapes for the wildlife, there are also the areas where we have more humans. So that means the rich wildlife areas has a higher human density, which puts them into direct conflict with the humans. And this is the nightlife map of our country. You will see that I think there are hardly any areas left in our country where there is no light during night. So on top of it is the linear infrastructure. We are the second largest country in terms of rail infrastructure network. We are the second largest country in terms of the roads, that means road infrastructure. And we are one among the top 3 countries in terms of power lines in our country. So whenever these animals, they try to move from one particular area to other particular area, from one protected area to other protected area, it's not only about presence of humans, it's about presence of linear infrastructure in terms of roads, in terms of canals, in terms of power lines, in terms of railway lines, which hamper the movement of these particular animals. And if you look in terms of the biodiversity of India, we are one of the biodiversity rich countries. At the same time, we are second in terms of human density, in terms of human population. We are also second in terms of the number of livestock heads in our country. So we are a biodiversity rich country because we have the mega biodiverse countries on this particular planet. Around 12% of the mammals are endemic to us. That means these are the mammals which are only found to our country. Around 45% of the birds are endemic to our country. Around 45% of the reptiles, 4.5% of the birds, around 33% of the plants, around 55% of the amphibians. So we have a lot of endemism. That means a lot of species which are only endemic to our country. At the same time, our protected areas are small. Our wildlife need to move from one particular area to other particular area. And at the same time, we have a huge human numbers, large infrastructure, and other ancillary human-related infrastructure, which influences the movement of these animals from one particular protected area to other protected area. And if you look at our country, we have shown commitment towards the conservation. We have a Wildlife Protection Act, which is one of the strongest act anywhere in the world. We have a National Tiger Conservation Authority. We have an authority dedicated for the species. I don't think there is any other country which has a dedicated authority for the conservation of a species. In spite of having being the second largest populated country in the world, with a lesser land area, we are still able to delineate and violate areas. That means the areas which are only for the wildlife. We are still declaring core areas. We have an incentivized voluntary relocation programs, which means that we have a package for the people, and those people who are interested, who are ready to come out of the protected areas, we have a package for them. And we are still identifying, even in a country which is landlocked, a country which has the highest human density, in spite of that, we are still identifying corridors for the movement of the animals from one particular area to other area. And it's not only about this. Only about the biodiversity we have. We are also one among the 10 most biodiverse countries on the world. We have 7.6% of the world's mammalian fauna, 12.6% of the birds, 6.2% of the reptiles, 4.4% of the amphibians, 11.7% of the fishes, and 6% of the flowering plants. We are the country with the largest number of wildcat species in the world. There is no other country which has so many number of wildcat species. We are the country which has a maximum number of tigers and large mammals like elephants and the gaur, which you also call as an Indian bison. It's not only country which talk about, we are talking about only about the wildlife. No, we have a rich wildlife habitats also. We have an amazing terrestrial land ecosystems. We have mountains, we have Himalayas, we have plains, we have northern plains, we have Deccan Peninsula, we have deserts, we have coastal plains, we have islands, we have forests, tropical wet evergreen and tropical dry deciduous forests, we have scrub forests, we have mountain and alpine forests, we have aquatic ecosystems, we have corals, we have estuaries, we have lakes, we have marine ecosystems, we have mangroves, we have wetlands, and we have rivers. So we are rich in terms of wildlife, and we are rich in terms of ecosystems. Now, the message of today is that recovering species. So the conservation of the habitat for key species has a positive impact on the populations of many other species due to them relying upon and sharing the same habitat types necessary for the long-term survival of the key species in question. If we are able to recover species, definitely we'll be able to restore the ecosystems the species inhabit. And if we are able to do that, probably we will be able to better protect both our ecosystems and our species. Now, in order to do that, we need to identify the species which serve as a better surrogates for species recovery and for the restoration of the ecosystems. And I think everybody in our country knows that what the magic tiger conservation has done in our country. So we are the country with highest number of tigers distributed in 17 states, and we all know that the protection of tigers in our country, we have been able to protect large number of other species associated with the tigers. And other important species which we think of, if we are able to recover that particular species, or if we are able to sustain or hold that particular species or protect that particular species, are the Asiatic elephants, distributed across 23 states in our country. And we have 4 different populations in our country. And if we are able to manage these elephants in these particular habitats, the habitat will be automatically protected. and these habitats will perform their ecosystem functions, what they are for. The other most important species is, if we are able to protect, if we are able to manage, and if we are able to sustain snow leopards in our trans-Himalayan systems, I think probably we'll be able to manage most of our trans-Himalayan landscape for future generations, as well as also protecting the source of our major rivers, as well as protecting the water, which is going to be very crucial in future for future generations. The other important species, which probably we think of, which has a pan-India distribution, which is distributed in many parts of our country, will be the Indian wolf, which is distributed in most of peninsular India. And we have a subspecies of this particular species in Himalayas also. So if we are able to protect the wolves in trans-Himalayan and peninsular areas, probably we'll be able to protect this particular species. And if we are able to protect this particular species, we are going to protect a larger landscape. And if we are able to protect this particular larger landscape, I think probably we'll be able to restore ecosystems, and we will be able to also maintain the ecosystem functioning of these particular systems. So while talking, what is happening? What is the extent of global loss which is happening every day? And what are the factors which are responsible for that? So every 20 minutes, we lose around 3,500 lives, human lives. And every 20 minutes, we lose one species. So by the time I will be finishing this particular talk, which is of 20 minutes, we have already lost one species. Every 60 minutes, we destroy around 240 acres of the forest. So by the time we are at 5, we have lost, I think, 240 acres of the land. So 70% of the world's known species are at the risk of extinction. 20% of the world's species could be gone in the next 30 years. And 80% of the decline in biological diversity is caused by habitat destruction. So if you look at what are the major factors which is responsible for the decline of the species, whether it's birds, whether it's reptiles and amphibians, whether it's mammals or it's fishes, it is habitat fragmentation. The second contributor is invasive and alien species. The third contributor is pollution. Fourth contributor is climate change. And fifth contributor is exploitation. And all these contributors are because of humans on this particular planet. So we are responsible for what's happening. And we have to pledge that from today onwards, we will try our best to protect species, to recover species, and restore habitats. And we, India, we as a country, we have already taken lead in this, because we are the country who are recovering the species. And you all will be knowing that it's not only species in our country, but we are also trying to recover the species which we have lost. And we have done this experiment after 75 years of the decline of the species. If we as a country have put this example that we can bring large pellet species back to our country, I think most other countries on this planet will have a learnings from us and will think about recovering of the species, even if it is the translocation of the species from other continents or other continents. With this, I thank you all and open this particular presentation for discussion and questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bilal, for giving an overview of the global scenario and the Indian scenario with respect to the theme today. We now move on to questions for you. So the first question for you is that keystone species is something we associate with wild spaces. How can zoos, in a zoo scenario can we link ex situ conservation work with landscape conservation?
I think there's a very interesting example in our country, which we are already doing. I think GIB conservation is both in situ and ex-situ conservation. We have some species which will not be able to recover directly on ex-situ ways, like directly in the field. That's why we need restoration, recovery of the species in captive conditions first, to breed those species in the captive conditions first. If we are able to do that, if we are able to manage a very good captive population under different conditions, then probably we'll be able to conserve and recover these species in the wildlands also. I think that there are a lot of such examples. We have already done with crocodiles. We have an option to do it with the gharials. We are doing it with Great Indian Bustard.
Right, sir. And moving on to the second question. The second question is, what kind of collaborations do you think would make a real difference on the ground to live up to the theme of species restoration in the long term?
So I think the most important for this is, since if you were able to see my last slide, is we humans, which we are responsible for most of the loss of the biodiversity on that particular planet. So if we are able to raise this awareness that we are responsible for the loss of the species, and we all pledge that from this particular day, we will try to minimize the loss in the biodiversity, I think that will be a greater contribution towards recovering our species. It's very difficult task because if you know that we are 130 billion people on this particular planet, and if everybody pledges and tries to do something for greater cause, I think probably we'll be able to manage this planet in a much better way. So it's all you and me who can come together, work together, and try to conserve and restore the species as well as habitats.
Right, sir. And the last question for you for this talk would be that if there are three species that you have, three species and landscapes that you have to pick globally, what do you think which are the species and landscapes do you think that should be prioritized?
Globally or in our country?
Globally.
So I will not go globally because there is already a list of 10 species, so which I leave to the people to Google it and to find it what are the two species which needs restoration in other parts of the country, but I will restrict it more to my country, more to our country. I think if you look at the central Indian landscape in our country has the highest human density. We have a huge human wildlife conflict in central Indian landscape. So I will prioritize entire central Indian landscape, which goes from our deserts to semi-arid and arid areas. I will prioritize that landscape for the conservation. That will be the first one. Secondly, I will prioritize all the wetlands in our country for prioritization as a habitat. And the third one, I will go for the coastal and marine ecosystem for restoration. If you talk in terms of the species, I will, so we have already done great with tigers. We will be doing great with the cheetahs. And I think the other carnivore species which we probably will try to restore and try to recover will be the Indian wolf, both in Trans-Himalayan and Himalayan landscapes. And in terms of birds, I think there are a lot of candidate species, but yes, we are already doing great with Great Indian Bustard, but I think if we are able to do something with Jordan's cursor. And there are many other species, and if you try to look for the any other mammalian species, which probably we can think of restore and recover will be the hispid hare, because that's also a species about which we don't know much information. But other than that, I think these are the species which immediately came to my head. But there are a lot more species, and we should not only limit to animal species, we should also think of the plant species. We should also think of the grass species, which were in our ecosystem. And if we restore them, probably we will restore the habitats. And if we are able to restore habitats, probably we'll be able to restore all the species which are dependent on those particular habitats.
Right, sir. Thank you so much. With this, we come to the end for today's webinar. So thank you so much, Dr. Bilal, on behalf of the Central Zoo Authority for sparing time out of your busy schedule and joining us for this talk. It was wonderful to connect with you on a topic of global importance, and I'm sure the viewers have also gathered much more insights into the entire, global species network and the kind of at the rate at which we're moving towards extinction. So thank you so much once again, and thank you viewers also for joining us for this talk. Namaskar.
Thank you so much.